We did it! It's not impossible. It can be done without a truck.
1, 2, 3, come on!
Alright, the first thing I did was I went to Big Box Home Depot and I bought a sheet of 3/4 inch birch plywood. I wanted to make sure I was using the best side for my tabletop, and as you can see here, there were several knots on this side, so this is my back side. And then I also bought a stack of 2x2s. This is just the regular dimensional lumber. I took those 2x2s and I marked the edges of my tabletop with a pencil, and then it was time to take the 2x2 over to the table saw and rip it down into a 1x2. You can see here that the 2x2 measures 1.5 inches, and so I pushed my fence over so that I could cut the 2x2 right in half down the center and made a mark. I had a problem that I ran into though. I put my 2x2 up and noticed that the gap between the fence and the blade was quite small, and that my push stick was not going to be skinny enough to fit past it. At least it was a little too close for comfort for me, so I had to make a quick jig to push my 2x2 through without having any harmful things happen to my hand. Luckily, my handy dandy jig worked and I safely was able to rip my 2x2s perfectly in half. Check that out. I then took those 1x2s and I glued them up to the bottom of my tabletop. This was basically just to give us some extra girth so that my tabletop looked thicker than what it actually was. And I did that to both sides. I then took the leftover pieces, marking the sides so that I could fit those in between the sides as well. After everything was glued up and dried, I flipped the tabletop over and took some finished select pine 1x2s, and using the same technique, I measured out the sides, marked it with the pencil, took it over to the chop saw and cut my angles at 45 degrees, and then proceeded to glue and nail those pieces to the edge to trim out my tabletop. Now that the tabletop is put together, it's time to move on to the table base. The whole base of my table was made out of 2x2s, so I cut down the 4 legs at the exact measurement, and the rest I did an approximate measurement so that I could have a more accurate measurement later. And here you can see what I was left with, and it'll make more sense as you see me build it. But I took all of these pieces over to my drum sander and gave each side a good sand. Since I was using a rough 2x2, this helped a lot. And then I had to knock down the corners with my orbital sander. When I was done sanding, I took all my pieces and lined them up together, cutting them all at the same time so that I would get the exact measurement on each of my pieces. So now that all my pieces are cut to their final lengths, it was time to decide which sides I was going to mark for my pocket holes. Those were the sides that were going to be the roughest that I didn't want to be seen, and then take them over to my Craig jig and begin drilling all of my pocket holes. I started by putting together the front of the desk, which included the 2 legs and then the stretcher piece that's going to go across the top of the table. And I also wanted to make sure that my pocket holes were facing the directions so that the tabletop would cover them and they would not be seen. I made sure to use a square so that I would end up with square corners, and proceeded to screw all of the pieces together. And then once that was finished, I flipped it over so that I could put the bottom stretcher piece on. So for the bottom stretcher, I made sure that the pocket holes were facing down so they wouldn't be seen. And then using some scrap pieces, I made some blocks, marking them and putting some arrows so that I knew exactly where they were going. So that way I could use it on the opposite side and make sure that my bottom stretcher is level on both sides. So I screwed each side in using those blocks, and then I checked for square, and it looked really great. It turned out so great, in fact, that I decided to do a dumb little dance for you, so enjoy. Alright, enough of that. Moving on, we are going to do the back side of the desk, which is basically the same as the front side without the bottom stretcher piece. And then here you can see me lining up all of the side pieces in a horizontal fashion, making sure that my pocket holes were all facing the bottom, other than the 2 top pieces that were facing the top and would be covered with the tabletop. Then using more spacer blocks, I clamped those in place and started screwing in all of these side pieces so that they would be nice and level. And then taking a leftover 2x2, I created an angle in the front to create a triangular design, and I measured it by clamping it to my desk, marking the lines, and then taking it over to the chop saw, lining up the lines at whatever angle that was, and proceeded to cut it out 2 pieces so that I could clamp those pieces in place and have my design in the front. You can see what that angle looks like here, and then to screw it together, I just screwed a 2.5-inch screw through the top of the tabletop into the angled piece, and proceeded to do the same thing with the opposite side. And then turning the table over, I screwed the bottom pieces in from the bottom of the desk. And there you have it. The bottom of the desk is finished. Looks pretty awesome to me. I'm gonna put the tabletop on just to get a feel for what it looks like, and then we'll go from there. I'm really happy with the way that this desk turned out. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and take it all apart again and glue it in place so that my joints are nice and strong. Then comes the most favoriteest part, which is sanding, and more sanding. And then I proceeded to paint the base black, which was to be the base coat for the spray paint that I was going to use. At this point, I wasn't sure what colors I wanted to do, what I was going to do with the top, so I was kind of winging it from here. But basically, this is how it started out. A black base, and then doing a faux concrete tabletop. If you're interested to see how I did that, check out the link below. Once I was done with the top and painting the base gold, it was finished. I'm really happy with the results. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. And if you want to watch more, check me out, subscribe, comment. I appreciate the support. And until next time, we'll see what's next.